Hey, friends, this is David Walls here, and you're listening to the Authority of Love on a special Family Foundation Friday. Our regular host, Greg Williams, is not with us today. Greg and his wife are enjoying a long overdue vacation, so I know you'll join me in praying that they have a blessed time together and safe travels back, and we look forward to having Greg host this program next week. But I'm excited this week. We're going to have a little bit different type of a program. I'm excited that I've got two of the Family Foundation team members with me today, Nick Spencer and Jesse Green. Thank y'all for joining us. And but today we're going to do a kind of a deep dive, a little bit of a deep dive in the time that we have, and talk about some really important Supreme Court cases that have been argued and we're waiting on important decisions on this term. But before we jump to that, I just want to remind folks on what Greg and I talked about last week. If you listen to that program, if you didn't, there was a really, really important new study put out by the EPPC on the harms of the chemical abortion pill that came out. I want Nick just to remind folks about that study and how they can get engaged.
Yeah, so EPPC is the Ethics and Public Policy Center. It's a think tank located in Washington, D.C., run by a guy named Dr. Ryan Anderson. The study that they did, they took, I think it was 800,000 different data points and looked at the adverse impacts on women from chemical abortion pills. And what they found is contrary to what the FDA says, where the FDA says you only have a 0.5% chance, I think, of having a severe complication with the abortion pill. EPPC actually found that it's, I believe, a little over 10% chance of a severe complication. So this is new evidence that really hasn't been studied or been looked at before. We really believe that this information should drive the Trump administration and others at the national level to re-examine the FDA authorization for mifepristone, to pull that authorization back to really as much as possible tighten up the restrictions on these things.
And Nick, we talked about last week that we've joined in on a letter to the Trump administration with others, but share with folks how they can take action on that issue.
So if you are engaged with the Family Foundation, if you get our emails, you probably will have seen that we have an action alert in our action center that allows you to contact individuals who would be able to really take action on this sort of stuff at a national level. So go to KentuckyFamily.org, go to our Action Center. You can send some messages there to some members of Congress and others, urging them to take important action in light of this new information.
Yeah, very, very important. But let's jump into kind of the meat of the program today. We wanted to recap a number of the important Supreme Court cases that Greg and I have talked about some over the last several months. But Jesse, just remind our listeners kind of where we are in the Supreme Court term and what just generally can be expected over the next couple months.
Yeah, so the Supreme Court has basically finished up hearing arguments on the main cases, including all the ones that we are tracking. And so what that means is the attorneys on both sides have presented their oral arguments to the courts, and the justices are now debating amongst themselves whether they want to rule for the people bringing the case to the Supreme Court, or if they want to stick with the lower court's decision and rule in favor of the party that is not bringing the case. And so at this stage, it's mostly internal discussions amongst the court. All the briefs, all of the discussions have been submitted to them, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you mentioned briefs. So a lot of this, multiple of these cases, most of these cases we're going to be talking about, we have joined amicus briefs in support of our position and the position held by many other pro-family organizations. What's the importance of an amicus brief?
Yeah, so an amicus brief is a brief that's submitted by a non-party to the case, and essentially what it is parties that are interested in the outcome of the case but are not officially a part of the lawsuit presenting their argument for why the court should rule in a specific way. So in our case, we have joined a number of briefs taking the pro-family position, urging the court to uphold pro-family values.
Yeah. So we're gonna run through a couple of these cases, and you know, it seems like every term you've got some important cases that impact family, you know, impact life and the abortion issue. But we certainly do this term, and we encourage folks to really be praying for the Supreme Court. We have every reason to believe, like in previous terms, that a lot of these important decisions will probably come in the month of June, which is when normally is essentially the end of this term. So let's jump in. One of the cases that we've talked a lot about is this case, U.S. v. Scrimity, dealing with the legislation to protect kids from being mutilated in the name of trying to change their gender. So, Jesse, if you just remind folks about that case.
Yeah, so this case comes from Tennessee's law that bans those quote-unquote surgeries on minors, and the argument that the LGBT crowd is making is that somehow the U.S. Constitution and the 14th Amendment protects the right to perform those surgeries on minors, and quite frankly, that's just a nonsense argument. The founders of this country and the people who wrote the 14th Amendment were not thinking about transgender surgeries when they were authoring that language. And so we're hopeful that the court will rule in favor of Tennessee and allow them to enforce their law, which would also allow Kentucky to enforce our similar ban on those operations. And so
yeah, there's been, and I forget the numbers now, someone can chime in, 23, maybe 25 other states that have passed help not harm style legislation to protect kids from gender ideology. Obviously, we now know too the Trump administration has signed some executive orders trying to help on this issue as well. But this will be the first time the court has directly addressed this issue, and certainly has an opportunity to have implications, not just in Tennessee, as you said, Jesse, but on pretty much probably any state that's passed a similar law. Nick, a couple other cases we want to mention. Both of these cases as well have legislation, or Kentucky has legislation that is similar in certain aspects. So the next case is Free Speech Coalition v. Paxton. Remind our listeners what that case is about.
Free Speech Coalition v. Paxton is a case that challenges Texas's version of age verification for online adult content. Kentucky, as you probably know, has a version of that law in place that actually ended up with adult content manufacturers basically removing their operations from the state. So this is Texas's version of that law. Basically, the question at issue is, do individuals need to age verify online in the same way that they would in a brick and mortar store? And does requiring that age verification violate any of their rights? Obviously, our position is that it does not violate any of their rights, and that it is a natural extension of what we've done in this country for decades upon decades of age verifying in brick and mortar stores. Really accessing that content online is no different. It's just a different medium, and states have a vested interest in making sure that individuals are of age when they access that material.
Absolutely, yeah. The core of this issue, the core of the legislation passed here in Kentucky, and I know the Texas legislation as well, was to protect kids, to ensure that kids don't have access to adult content. And has, we talked about before, the technology is there for these companies to provide it, and they simply don't want to. And so this case as well, I think there's been 19 or so states, maybe more now, that have passed similar legislation, so very important. Let's jump now into an important case about parental rights. Share about that case, Nick.
Yeah. Mahmoud v. Taylor, which was a case argued at the Supreme Court, I believe 2 weeks ago, concerns a group of families in suburban D.C. Basically, they live in Maryland, Montgomery County, and this group of families wanted to opt their children out of particular programs having to do with sex education in schools.
And reading books.
And reading, right, yeah.
I mean, LGBT storybooks.
Right.
And I won't go over some of the titles again like we did a couple weeks ago, but yeah, sorry.
if you have the time, listen to the oral arguments in that case. It is absolutely insane, some of the things that these kids were being forced to read, especially at some of the ages they were forced to read them. So should the parents of an individual child have the ability, do they have the right to say, no, my child's not going to read that book. There's no government interest in them reading that book. I don't want it. That was really the issue in that case.
The question is, do parents have a right to not have their children indoctrinated, heavily indoctrinated with inappropriate content? And so just to remind folks, we mentioned or alluded to SB 150, which was passed a couple of sessions ago. An important part of that law included some parental rights protections in schools, including in Kentucky, as it relates to human sexuality curriculum, the schools actually have to get an affirmative opt-in from a parent.
Correct.
Notification and opt-in, which I think is the preferred policy in this arena, but certainly in a minimum, parents should have the ability to opt out. And in this case, this school district, this situation, my understanding of it is they specifically passed a policy to remove the right of parents to opt out from these LGBT storybooks, and just in this area.
That's correct. So
this is, again, an important case. It will have implications on parental rights and education moving forward. Jesse, a last case, in all of these cases that we've talked about so far, we've been able to join friend of the court briefs. The last case is Medina versus Planned Parenthood of South Atlantic. Share just a little bit about that case.
Yeah, so this is a case on whether South Carolina and other states have the ability to remove Planned Parenthood from their state Medicaid programs. And really, this is important because even if tax dollars right now can't directly go to funding abortion, we still have indirect funding because we're giving taxpayer dollars to organizations that perform abortions. And, naturally, this means that if expenses are covered in one area for an organization, they have more money freed up in their abortion area, also increasingly in their gender transition area as well. And so a good decision from the court would open the door for states to remove Planned Parenthood from Medicaid programs and protect taxpayer dollars from subsidizing abortion mills and their allies.
Yeah. Important topic, and we dealt with this in a somewhat related fashion this legislative session about protecting our tax dollars in Medicaid from funding gender transitions. Jesse, we've got just a second here. We want to mention one other case that was just argued, and that's a case out of Oklahoma dealing with charter schools. Just share a brief update on that case.
Yeah, so this case is about whether religious organizations can sponsor charter schools. We did not join a brief in this case, but we do support increasing education options for parents. And so we do hope the court will rule in favor of the charter school that wants to open up. It's a Catholic organization that wants to start a charter school in Oklahoma.
So that is going to be another important one to keep our eyes on. So that's 5 cases. 5 cases in under 15 minutes.
There's a lot more we could say.
A lot more we could say, but encourage folks to be praying for the U.S. Supreme Court as it relates to these decisions. So I want to say thanks again for y'all joining me today so we could provide this important update. But as Greg likes to say, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your prayers. Thanks always to the Lord, and make it a great day in Christ. This is Family Foundation Friday. Have a blessed day.